So I'll get us started. We may have other people log on as we get going this morning, but thank you everyone for being here for this webinar on working with support planners. I'll introduce our presenter here in a minute, but thank you, Marta, for bringing this content to us. And thank you to everyone else for joining us today. My name is Jamie O'Connor, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Family Voices of Minnesota. And I'm just gonna quickly go through who we are as an organization, just in case you haven't heard of us before. So Family Voices of Minnesota is a statewide nonprofit here in Minnesota. We're the state affiliate organization for Family Voices National, and we're also the state alliance member of Parent to Parent USA. All of us on staff here at Family Voices of Minnesota are parents of children with some type of disability or special health care need. And we are all working from home. We don't have a brick and mortar so that we can be located throughout the state of Minnesota. So what we're offering right now is individual assistance, so one-to-one connections, usually over the phone with other parents, so that we can offer information and support and emotional support and resources to one another so that we don't have to start from scratch and that we can support one another and learn from one another. We also have an amazing network of volunteers across the state who have gone through a training based off of best practices from Parent to Parent USA that also offer support and share their expertise and knowledge. Right now, we're also offering more than five every month virtual support groups. We newly on our calendar for the last few months have a group for Spanish-speaking families. We have some long-standing groups that are more general, some age-specific groups, so early childhood and elementary. We also have a WhatsApp group for Somali-speaking families, and we also recently had our first Somali virtual group. We do our best to provide informational webinars like the one that you're here to join in today, and opportunities for family leaders to develop their skills. So trainings for that, and monthly newsletters that we push out to share all of our events and important information with families. So with that, unless anyone, Carolyn, do you have anything to add before I move on? Great. I just want to say welcome again, and I'd like to introduce our presenter for the day, Marta Bradshaw, who is a certified support planner with Life Planning LLC, and who's generously joined us today to share information about working with support planners. Marta?
Hello, everybody. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a parent of two special needs children. My son is 22 and has autism, and my daughter is 18. She has autism, developmental delay. Her primary issue right now is epilepsy. And working with them, I've been writing their waivers for, I calculated back, I've been writing my son's for 16 years. And I started writing other people's waivers because I was in an autism parent support group. And just from writing our own, you know, I started gaining more knowledge, and I got more questions than I had time to go ahead and ask for support myself. So just decided to take off and do it on my own. Similar to the people at Family Voices, I work at home. Mostly for me, it's because I can be here for my kids. And I think that that's a really important piece an opportunity on the waiver too, and I'll get to that when we talk about that section of paid parent. So I sent out information, and part of it was the different types of waivers that are available. There are more than this, but the other ones mostly apply to adults. The primary ones that I deal with are the DD waiver and the CADI waiver. So most parents with children with disabilities who get on the system are probably going to be in one of those two waivers. And we'll talk a little bit how they differ. They differ very, very little. So it's kind of easy that way. I do want to explain one thing, is that the state of Minnesota is constantly changing how they do systems. Our waiver document is about to change dramatically, which is very helpful and confusing at the same time for people. And the other thing is that we need to understand, I think for you guys, to understand that the state of Minnesota provides information and rules and regulations for how things are handled. And then that goes down to the counties. The counties do not follow them the same in any way. So you might have one county that handles things one way and another county that just totally does something different. So it's important that you have a support planner that is familiar with your county and the little, what does my friend call them, weirdsies of each one. So the primary ones, if you're good with, Anoka County is a big one that has never seen a rule or regulation they don't want to follow in their own way. Washington County is good. They have all different kinds of ways to do things too, but they're a little bit less strict. And then Ramsey and Hennepin, of course, are the two largest counties, and I do not do work with them. So I try to stay out of their way, because theirs are a little bit different. So that's just a me thing. But I wanted to talk with you, start out by talking about what support planners do. And that's a really hard question. So support planners do as much as you want them to, or as little you want them to. You hire them to help you with the waiver services. There is not one set of guidelines that we have. So the counties say that we provide an agreement with our clients, and then they decide what they're going to use and what services they're not going to use. And so I kind of provided you a list of what I provide for the most part for my services. And so other support planners, it may be just a little bit different, but very close. And you should be signing an agreement every single year, because things change through the waivers and what we do. I think it's very important to know what you're going to be paying for with your support planner, that they know what you want. Communication with them is absolutely key. So in hoping to help explain things, and it's kind of a difficult concept, but the person who is a support planner's client is the person who is the recipient of the waiver. So they are also the person who is in charge of the whole thing. So they end up getting their own EIN number and employee identification number. So they employ you, they employ me. So we're all looking forward to their best interests and what their needs are strictly. So anything having to do with the waiver has to be only for the recipient's needs. And I think that's sometimes a hard thing to define, between what they need and what you want them to be provided. So we'll go into a little bit more of that. But so the first thing that I do is help people understand the waiver process, which hopefully you guys will get from me today. It can be an overwhelming thing, and it's something that you need somebody to help navigate. And I hope that every support planner would help you do that. So I always start out with a meeting to discuss the client's needs. I do that every year, whether it's the first year, whether we're doing the 10th renewal, whatever it is, we need to discuss it because you don't know, what's changed year to year. I also include, I like to go on and do some investigation with the different diagnosis that a person has for the waiver. And I do want to be very clear that every diagnosis your child has does not mean it is a diagnosis that will relate itself to the waiver. So that needs to be very clear. And I'll give the example of using my daughter. When she first started her waiver, her epilepsy was like way in the background. It was not the primary reason for the waiver. It would not have been allowed to request an item. I couldn't request anything related to her epilepsy. Autism was her primary diagnosis at that point in time. Now, with all the changes she's had, her epilepsy is her primary diagnosis. So, and autism is her secondary. But typically, it's 2 to 3 diagnoses that they will look at when they're identifying what the needs are for the waiver. They're not going to look at everything. So just to clarify that, because I think that that's a very difficult things for people to understand. Things like allergies, people want to add that stuff in, and it's just not going to be approvable items. So primarily what support planner's responsibility is going to be to write the waiver document. The waiver document is basically the budget. So when you're provided the budget by the county, the support planner helps you write a document that says what you're going to use that for. And we'll go through a bunch of examples of what you can do later. But so that document, we need to put on there goals, and every goal is going to be related to needs and diagnosis. Every item on the waiver is going to has to be listed somewhere in the needs, has to be listed somewhere in the diagnosis. So that budget really does, it does give the clients and the direction for the county of where you want to provide your services. So there are 3 people that are involved in the waiver process, and that is the county. There is a fiscal agency, and a fiscal agency, they handle allocating, paying out the waiver. So the county identifies what the budget is going to be. The fiscal will pay out the money. Simple as that. Then the third person is the, managing party. Typically the managing party is the parent. So if I ever say that, I mean you. And as you can identify a support planner. We are not a required part of the process. Sometimes social workers will very highly, suggest that we become part of the process because it is difficult to navigate. But you don't have to do it if you don't choose to. And I do have clients who I will do the first year just to kind of get them started. And then personally, I have a waiver kit that I can pass on to somebody, and they can take it from there should they choose to. So I don't think many support planners have that, but that's something that I like to offer. The other piece of the waiver that is required in every county is the creation of a health and safety plan. And so you're going to go through and identify all the areas that are concerns for you with regards to what the diagnoses are. I have a 10-page document that I use for that. So you can kind of see all the different areas, that may be, that have something to do with that. So we talk about financial things, we talk about safety, we talk about what the diagnoses are and what kind of things we medically. It also goes through abuse, boundary setting, all different kinds of things. So it's got a ton of areas, just so we touch everything. That also helps write the waiver also, because if we're talking about a whole bunch of high safety needs and it's not written on health and safety plan, then it's going to be more difficult to approve on the waiver itself. So all of the documents kind of combine together. And it's very important that they match that way. I was asked whether, you guys might have information or questions about addendums and making changes to the waiver. You can do that any point in time throughout the year. You can write as many addendums as you want to. You might annoy your social worker if you write too many, but you can write as many as you want to. And again, I'm going to put out there, the support planner is not necessary to do that. You can write an addendum anytime you want, and you can do it on your own. There are addendums. I prefer to keep them in the waiver document, but every county has a form that you can write an addendum on easily, separately as a parent. So everything I do costs you money. Everything you do saves you money. Look at it that way. So I think it's just a matter of, what you want ease wise, or what you think you want to deal with. So now, other things on the list I gave you, one of them is attending care meetings. And so when renewals come up, social workers will often suggest that we combine meetings, that the social worker shows up and I'll show up to a meeting. While that is lovely and it's a wonderful sounding thing, we're all collaborating and whatever, it is not beneficial. It's not good use of your time, because if you find me to be long-winded, which you would, the social workers are long-winded. And so you are basically paying for me to talk to them. And I don't think that's a good use of your funds, because they're not, nothing that they do is charged to the waiver. Everything I do is charged to the waiver. So to kind of compare things, I typically have an hour to an hour and a half for the waiver. The social worker meetings I have been involved in have been 3 hours plus long. I think that that's a lot of unnecessary use of your funds. So the next two items I somehow, duplicated in there. I did forget. We're communicating with the social worker, and the might also be called your caseworker, and the fiscal support entity. One of the things that I was asked to talk about was the communication and how you let your support planner know how and who you want them to talk to. And I think that that's a very important piece. Some people are fine with support planners talking to the county on their own, without having be on the phone with somebody. Some people want to be on every conversation. And I think you need to do what's comfortable for you. You need to develop a relationship with your support planner where you can say, I'd like to be part of everything that goes on, every email that goes out, every phone conversation you have. And that's fine. I think a lot of times, I'm just going to say that the counties and fiscals are less aware of it than I feel like, at least I am as a support planner. They feel like that they can contact me and ask me questions and things. And I don't want to speak for my client. I'll give you an example that happened just yesterday. So I have a social worker that wants me to do a revision on a waiver. They have something that they want changed. They want to add a service to the waiver, and they want me to revise it. Now, my clients, I don't know what they want. I got a call from the social worker yesterday asking for this. And I asked her if she had discussed it with the client, and she said no, but I really think it needs to be added. So please write a revision. That's not my job to do what the social worker wants. It's my job to do what the client wants. So I contacted my client, and they did not want the revision written. They did not want the service added. So it's very important to know that sometimes the social workers and fiscals can forget to include the client and everything. And I think that that's that's something that's kind of a shame. But And the other piece of that is not only do I want my clients to be included in everything, I want to be included in everything. So you can do things outside of your support planner's services, which is fine, but you need to keep them in the loop. So other time, otherwise things are going on and then we get asked questions and we have no idea. So it's just really helpful for us to be copied on everything that happens. So we're kept up to date at least. We'll move on to supplying and requesting items from the forms that are required. Sometimes there's backup documentation that's required in order to approve a service on a waiver. An example, there's something that they call an alternative treatment form. So if you have something you're asking for on the waiver that's not kind of a typical thing, or it's not something that's covered through MA, such as music therapy as a good example, you would have to complete an alternative treatment form. Sometimes people have trouble, contacting the doctor, or they don't have, a way to get information to them. They don't have a fax machine. I'll be more than happy to contact them. That's a me thing. I don't know what other support planners, would be willing to do, and what they say they're willing to do. So go through your agreement when you sign it with your support planner, make sure you understand things and, ask them about that stuff like that. I specifically say the additional context because there's a section on the waiver that lists that. And so they're agreeing that I can communicate with those people. And I think that, that's important to understand. If people on my contract don't want me to be able to do that, there's a section for them to mark no. So I also offer the services of reviewing the spending summaries. When you do your waiver throughout the year, as you spend money, your fiscal entity will document everything and they will, put out reports and things. And so I am more than happy to review those. And I think other support planners are willing to do that. It just makes sure that you're on target with your spending. So the fiscals will tell you if you're on target with your spending. They will not get after you and encourage you to move forward and do what you need to do in order to spend your funds. And I'm more likely to goose my clients in that direction, give them little nudges. So, and we're going to talk in long detail about this, but I will help you find services that need to be put on the waiver, help you identify knowledge that you might need to know about, because I know what can go on a waiver, or mostly what can go on a waiver. You don't know what you don't know until you ask the questions. And I think that that's a really hard thing to know, and the most important part that a social or a support planner can do with you. So I have a 6-page document that I provide my clients that has everything I've ever had approved on a waiver. And it is by no means exhaustive. So I give it to them to kind of get their juices flowing about the types of things that might be approvable on their waiver. So that's just an important piece. And when I say might be approvable on their waiver, it's because, and just because an item would be allowed to be approved on the waiver does not mean it would be allowed to be approved on your child's waiver. So again, that goes back to the diagnosis. It goes back to the needs. So, and then I cover everything else as other duties as requested. So, you can always ask for something else, you want done. So when the waiver is written, you might, when we get back approval for things, there might be things that are left denied on the waiver. Now, if at any point in time you want to be able to appeal something that's denied on the waiver, that item has to remain on the waiver. So social workers would say it needs to be removed, and the support planner will say no, because if it goes off of the document, then you have nothing to appeal. It has to stay on there. It will be marked as pended, just so you kind of know that language. So it's going to hang out in limbo until the state finally makes a decision. The final thing about support planners that I want to talk about personally for me is I will write anything you want into a waiver, but I personally have some ethical issues, and there are sometimes if somebody wants something, I will say, I won't, I'm not willing to include that waiver. I'm not willing to write that part of the waiver, and you can take care of that, or it would be left out of the waiver. So if I just feel like something's not appropriate, like we are allowed to ask for an inordinate amount of hours now as paid parents, I don't think that's appropriate for everybody to get overtime or something. And so I always let people know where I think, things that are approvable and where I think their child's at. Somebody might disagree with me, and that's fine. But at that point, that piece of the waiver would be their responsibility to write. So we talked about the diagnosis, and we talked about the diagnosis related to the needs. So if I were to ask you what needs you might identify your child as having, your list would probably be about, that long. So we might talk about behaviors or emotions. But as a support planner, we need to do everything. So I would have to take that out and kind of, draw it out to activities of daily living, depending upon the age. There would be, some other things that we might add. So it might be things like managing finances, as a person gets older, shopping, learning how to do household management. We're going to work with socialization skills, time management, organizational skills. Someone needs structure or help with communication or mobility. So all of these things need to be in that section, because again, everything requested on the waiver has to go back to the diagnosis and the needs. If they haven't been identified someplace, it's not going to be, something's not going to be approvable. So I gave you a sheet that says the item/service examples. And I think that that's a really important thing. So I tried to, this is my 6-page form, that gets people's juices flowing, that I abbreviated to you guys. So the waiver is provided to allow someone to remain living in the community. So basically what the state considers is that your child is able to remain living with you in the community if these services are provided. So they would qualify for maybe living in a facility, a halfway house, just different places. And so obviously, we don't want our children residing someplace else. So the waiver helps you keep them at home. I think it's a little bit over the top to say, our children might require services and have to move out of the house if we couldn't help them, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So the items on the waiver need to be cost effective. They need to be, as I said before, for the sole benefit of the recipient, and they need to be approvable by the county. And that's at their discretion. As I said, the counties, the buck kind of stops with them. They can say something different than the state can. They can require more regulations. So the farther you drill down, the more regulations and requirements can be added on. So that's a different piece. The other piece of social workers I'd like you to understand is that social workers come from one of two places. They can come directly from the county. Most do not. So most are subcontracted through the counties. And when I say that the counties provide, this amount of what will be approvable, the people who are subcontracted through, that is just anybody's guess as to what's going to be okay. Counties try to provide them guidance, but that can be a little bit more difficult. They may be more or less likely to approve something on a waiver. So sometimes as a support planner, I'll say, well, I really want us to go to the county and ask that question. So you always have that opportunity and options. So when we go down and we talked about maintaining the ability for someone to remain in the community, we want to enhance their community inclusion, develop and maintain personal, social, physical, or work-related skills, and decrease dependency on formal supports. Obviously, we're always trying to increase independence and the ability for family members and friends to get education and training in order to help somebody in the waivers. So there are 3 different categories right now that we can put things into for the waiver. I'll put it that way. And so these are the areas that you would be looking at to add services and items and staffing, which is we come to first, which is the personal assistance. So a paid parent of a minor can be paid through the waiver document. You can do 40 hours a week is typically approvable. You can only, of course, get the amount of hours that the waiver will support, but you can do up to 40 typically. Now, this last year, they decided that paid parents can get overtime. We all know that we're working with our children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if your child needs significantly more than the typical person, then you can request overtime on the waiver. If there are 2 paid parents, you can request, each of you can request 40 hours on the waiver. So that's 80 hours a week, which was not the case before. Last year, it was 40 hours between the 2 parents. And if you had more than 1 child on, on the waiver, like I do, 40 hours between the 2 parents, between the 2 children. So 40 hours in the single household. So we've expanded beyond that, which is kind of nice. I was asked to talk about the tax implications for paid parent. Now, what everybody will say typically is that, this is what we're told, and you should discuss it with your accountant. So the bottom line is paid parent wages are not taxable. So there are some benefits that you might request that would be taxable, and that would be paid time off and any holiday pay that you get would be taxable. Other than that, none of the rest of it is taxable. There's a tax notice called, what is it, 2014-7, and it'll give you all the blah, 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 and very confusing answers about that answer. I went through and read it the other day just to, make sure what it would be like to understand it as a paid parent. And I was going to provide it to you, but basically it was so confusing that yes, your accountant should be the one reading it if you have one. So support staff is another thing that's approvable on a waiver. Support staff is very difficult to find. You can put out advertisements and things for support staff, but right now, what we most often say is that if you've got another family member that can be paid for being a support staff, that's great. If you have a family friend that wants to be paid and can provide services, those are 2 wonderful options. Some of us have been blessed, and I have to say I have been blessed. I have 2 people who serve my children, one for my daughter, one for my son. My daughter's support staff has been with us, I want to say, for 12 years. My son's has been with us for 5, and she is a special education teacher. My daughter's is a social worker. So that is a rare thing. And I try not to tell my clients that because I think it just makes people feel bad, but there you go. And we did that, obviously years ago, but the wages, the amount of work that's required, the amount of care that is required, sometimes it's just very difficult for someone coming in the outside to do that. And if you hire a company with PCAs, you can get them to come in, but you are not guaranteed the same person every time. And I think that consistency is an important thing. And it's something you need to think about when you hire support staff. Beyond support staff, and support staff can do this also, you can get somebody who provides respite time for you. So the current buzzwords are primary caregiver relief, which used to be respite last year. Now it's primary caregiver relief. We used to talk about relieving stress. Now we talk about caregiver fatigue. So we may use different words, but it's the same thing. So you can have somebody who cares for your child on some days during the week, or on the weekends, once a month, twice a year, whatever it may be, and they just provide you relief so you can decrease your stress level a little bit, which is nice. Get some time away, because I think a lot of us are in the same boat that I am. If there's not somebody with my children, then I have to be the one there. So it's nice to have somebody who can come in and provide that relief. There are also, if you have 2 children or more, I've got one person that has triplets, they can do shared care services, which means they are all paid for the same hours, as long as their goals all mesh together. So if they've got different needs, different goals, then you have to be paid for hours at different times. If they have goals that are all together, then you can be paid for shared care services. So everybody gets paid at the same time. The paid parent wage increases at that point in time. So it's beneficial to be able to have that. I have shared care services with my daughter and son. Because of their ages, we're working on food preparation skills and housekeeping skills. So there are a few hours a week that we do shared care and we work on those goals. So that works for us. And there are, younger family members. Oftentimes it's behavioral regulation or emotional regulation, and everybody's working on that. So shared care might work for that. My mom with triplets, every hour she gets paid is shared care. So, the kids, obviously being triplets, they have very similar needs. And so we're able to align it so that she gets shared care for everything. The other thing that can happen in that personal assistant section is that the support staff can be given merit wages or raises, bonuses, sorry. And the bonuses are to try to retain staff. They have to get them based on merit, or, having achieved so many things or providing so many services to your child. But, giving a merit bonus throughout the year can help retain staff at some point. So, okay, let's go into the next section. And here lies our difference between a CADI waiver and a DD waiver. There is a section of the waiver that is called treatment and training. It is a required section on the DD waiver. So there has to be something requested under treatment and training. It could be training for you. It could be training for your child. For instance, if they're potty training, you can get a book about potty training. You can go to, for yourself, you can go to a convention. So there's lots of different options. There's online training nowadays. So things are out there. Anything that has to do with one of you learning something, it can go into this section. The other thing that can go into this section is therapies, other services. So if it's not something that is allowed by medical systems and they won't cover it, it can typically go on the waiver. That's where that alternative treatment form comes in. So there's hippotherapy, there's music therapy, there's listening therapy, there's different behavioral therapy. There's just, I have a list that's just probably, this long. So I gave you just kind of bites of that right now. So you can get things like swim lessons on here. And when you hear swim lessons, I think we often think of different things. The waiver thinks of swim lessons as learning basic safety stuff. So learning to tread water, being able to get back to the side of the pool, learning how to float. Once a child is doing strokes, we're all done with swim lessons being approved through the waiver. So we're just trying to get that basic safety need met. And that is a good example of the one thing that is very important with the waiver is that if something is a basic parental responsibility, like providing your child swim lessons, then it is not approvable through the waiver. So no matter what the need is, if it's something that a typical parent might have to do, then it's not approvable through the waiver. So a good example of this is some children, my son uses it. There is a program in Forest Lake that's called LINK. It's through the special education arm of the school district. So they have things that they go do, every week. On Wednesdays, they can go through. Last night was game night. They might go out to dinner to learn to do, stuff there. They go play miniature golf, all these different activities. That used to be approvable in the waiver. In fact, it's on my son's waiver right now. Next year, it will not be, because now they're looking at it and saying, this child may have a special need that options with the community activities, but other children are doing other things with the community activities. So they're not going to pay, just because it's a special needs focused program. So, that's something new. And that's something I just heard about last week. So the waivers are ever changing with what's approvable and what's not. But that's a good example of that. So let's go down to the next one, which is environmental modifications. So the big thing when we hear about modifications, you can in fact do modifications to your house, or if you needed something done with your vehicle. And so a modification to the house might be a bathroom. So changing a bathroom over with a tub that, is easy to access with a wheelchair, or, you can step in and out, has the raised seat. We just finished one for my daughter that we have a walk-in tub for her with the raised seat, not because she necessarily needs it, but because she can't bathe herself and I need it. So my ability as I get older to sit on the floor next to the tub and bathe her is limited. Now I can stand next to the tub and bathe her, and it is much easier. And so helping a person age in place and letting their caregiver age in place with them is one of the reasons why someone might be approved for a home modification. So, and that is $5,000 that will come out of the waiver. So our home modification cost, I think it was $48,000. So $5,000 came out for me. $35,000 was paid by the county, and the next waiver span, I will pay whatever the next available, the next amount is, because it went above the 40,000 approvable. So 5,000 you charge, everything else comes out through the county, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Think of everything that you could have done to your home to make things easier for taking care of your child, or easier for them. So assistive technology, like an iPad, you can do that. Some things medical assistants will cover, and some things they won't. So depending upon what you're asking for, the county may ask you to get a denial from medical assistance first. And so we put it on the waiver. You have to go through that hoop. If it gets denied, it can stay on the waiver. If it gets approved, we take it off and medical assistant pays for it. A good one on there is I put the iPad or tablet. If it's for communication needs primarily, then the medical assistance will typically cover it. If it's for doing other things, need related, so we're not talking about playing Minecraft, we're talking about learning ADL skills, using it. We have a smart toothbrush that it can connect to, and it'll show the child that they're brushing well, and where they need to brush next, and all of that good stuff. So those are some things that are available with tablets and that assistive technology. Monitoring technology is available also. So when we say monitoring for children, we mean, tagging them with a GPS device. So you can get that. You can get monthly monitoring fees covered. So both could be covered under the waiver. You can get the baby cameras put throughout your house if that's a required need, or people sometimes get cameras put on the outside of their house so they can view their child while they're playing. So, whatever is required to meet that particular need. I have one child that's on my plan, and he's got a GPS device because he likes to try to run away from home. The other thing that he has on his waiver is the outdoor cameras. And that is because his parents need to know what direction he ran. So hopefully we'd catch it on the camera before the GPS device was needed, but you can do those types of things in order to keep your children safe. And it's helpful too, because you don't have to be with them every second of the day. They can learn to become, gradually more independent. So it offers you the security of knowing that, you can see what's going on, but the independence with them not feeling that you're there every second. So good practice. There are special diets that can be approved on the waiver. By no means can every diet be approved on the waiver, and some make sense, some don't. But so it would be a matter of what a typical food would cost versus what it would cost, being on a special diet. So the easy one is gluten-free, what, non-gluten-free bread costs, and the difference between that and gluten-free bread, which we all know is very expensive. So you subtract the two, the waiver would cover that extra fee. So adaptive clothing and footwear are available through the waiver. In that they've made changes to that last month too. And so, but covering AFOs on children's feet if they have that adaptive clothing. If you don't want your child to be able to undress themselves on their own because they will do it randomly in stores, you can get clothing that zips in the back or whatever, so they cannot pull it off on their own. Adaptive equipment is of course covered through the waiver, and that might be something. I have somebody who has listening therapy, and so they need special headphones. the headphones are covered through the waiver. So that any kind of things that would help someone to adapt a different activity that they might need. So for instance, and now I don't even know whether they're still approvable. I guess we'll see next time I ask for one, but trampolines have been approvable through the waiver if they have that net. And so that's the adaptive equipment there, is that if the child can't, fall off the trampoline, then that's considered, adaptive. So you can get diapers or chucks, incontinent products through the waiver that MA won't cover. So MA will cover a specific amount of most incontinent products, but some children go through more than that. And so above and beyond, they'll cover. And then sensory items. So sensory chews, fidgets, just all different kind of activities that you can get that way. So those would also be approvable through the waiver. Now, my personal view of all of this is going to be what your budget amount is. So according to your budget amount, I always would try to maximize paid parent hours versus asking for stuff on the waiver. And the reason I would do that is because it's not taxable. You're not being taxed on your wages. It is much easier for you to pay for it out of pocket than keep track of all of the receipts, remembering how to turn them in, doing all the, stuff with the fiscal, asking the fiscal to order things. It's just a lot extra to go through, and it's unnecessary because you can pay it out of pocket. So that's always what I encourage to my clients. Some don't want to do it that way, or we may want to be requesting something that the upfront cost is so much. We want to request it through the waiver. A good example of that might be an adaptive bike. Those can be several $100s. So if somebody doesn't want to have to come up immediately with that out of pocket, then we would put that on the waiver. So that's just a little tip. I didn't used to be like that, so I hadn't thought of it that way immediately as a support planner. So things you learn along the way. The fourth section that I didn't mention before was the self-directed support activities. And I didn't mention it because you're not asking for anything there. Those are going to be fees that are required for the most part. So your workers' compensation insurance, is covered under there. Some fiscals require that paid parents have workers' compensation. Some don't. Fiscal supports, your fiscal entity, they have a monthly fee. Some will also charge for a wage fee. They're going to charge a payroll fee for any amount of payroll that comes out. Some don't. And then, of course, the support planner fees if you were going to do that. So looking for a fiscal entity is a very important thing to do in getting in contact with them when you child has been approved for a waiver, just so you can get the process moving with becoming a paid parent. You actually have to apply for it. You have to get a background check done and be able to be approved that way in order to be a paid parent to take care of your own child. That's just the way things go. I had an adult, because I do elder waivers and types of things. I had an adult that wanted their child to be able to take care of them. One of them had a issue that they couldn't pass the background check. And so although they're living together, he is the one providing all of the care. He's not able to be paid for by the waiver. So just keep that in mind when you're applying. So he's trying to have his record expunged so that he would be able to be paid. We'll see whether he's lucky enough to do that or not. So those are kind of the different sections of the waiver. I wanted to give opportunity for people to ask things. If you have different questions for me, does anybody have questions about support planners? Really, nobody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Marta. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. I really appreciate all of the information and also the handouts. You mentioned that it was good to maximize paid parent as opposed to sort of getting, smaller items. But I'm assuming you didn't mean that about like some of the therapies and activities that you were talking about. Is that true?
It is true in that if you don't want to come up with the money up front, then by all means, it should be on the waiver. If it's money that's not a problem for you, then it's always easier to be paid, out of pocket. So, yes, somebody who has music therapy and that's, you have to buy a package of sessions, then yeah, that you might want to pay for through the waiver versus paying for it out of pocket. So, like I said, you can always ask for things through the waiver. I have one mom that likes to ask for absolutely everything through the waiver. She will not let me do anything on the waiver that would allow me to round up to make sure if there were differences in what the cost of things once she finally ordered things were. And so inevitably, she has had up to 5 revisions at least in order to add an extra few cents over to an item or whatever. So that's why I think it's easier. It kind of saves that time later on and all the headaches. So. Just reading over here.
Yeah. Do you want me to read it out or you got it?
Yeah, why don't you read it out?
On the same topic, if a parent takes a majority of their plan as paid parent income, is there a benefit for listing what the parent is spending those funds on to show the county? Meaning, is there a benefit to showing this information to the county?
No. There is no benefit to showing that information to the county. Absolutely not. So the other piece of that I didn't mention is, you can buy things that would not be approvable on the waiver, with your wages. And so that's not necessarily a good idea to talk with them about that. But I do think instead of mentioning specific items, you put into goals what those items, what needs are going to be met, what those items might be for. So if you're going to purchase different fidgets, then putting in a goal related to sensory and that your child will use fidgets is fine. So I think that's a good idea. As a good example of this, Anoka County now requires that fidgets go for one sensory only, 1 sense only. So you can do something for oral fidgets, or you can do something, for somebody who needs that tactile, but one item. So one of those only. Now, if you go on to the websites, they're sold in boxes of fidgets. And so the waiver won't approve a box of fidgets in Anoka County. So, but it's much cheaper for you to buy a box of fidgets than it is to buy a single one. So yeah, I would mention it in more general terms that way, and put it as a goal.
Thank you. I feel like I should know this, but are support planners used only on traditional waiver options, or are they also used on consumer directed?
The CDCS
Like the
waiver,
CDCS, yeah.
the CDCS waiver is the only place support planners are. So
Gotcha.
traditional waivers are written through the counties currently, and so support planners are not involved with those. The currently named consumer support grants, support planners can help with also.
Okay.
And we all know that that's changing, or if you don't know, the consumer support plan or consumer support grants are changing. There's going to be a new name for them next time people renew. So, oh, I did forget to mention, the moment you know that your child is either gotten a waiver or is transitioning through the waiver is the time you need to find a support planner if you're going to do that, and the time you need to find your fiscal entity. So do those things immediately. And the support planners, I would suggest asking them who your fiscal entity should be, who would be beneficial. So when you ask your social worker who they suggest as a support planner or as a fiscal entity, they have a list. They have to provide you the list. They cannot tell you who's good at it. They cannot tell you who's not so good at it. And as your support planner, we work for you. We do not work for the county. And so I can tell you anything I want. I can tell you the experiences I've had with different fiscal entities. And as long as you don't get me in trouble, I'll be more than happy to share those with you. So.
Thank you, Marta. Debbie Harris has her hand raised.
Hi, Marta. I can put my camera on, I guess. I noticed that a number of families have raised concerns that when they do ask for reimbursements for expenses on their support plan, it takes the fiscal agent or fiscal agency a long time to disperse the reimbursements. And so I'm wondering if you have experienced that with families that you work with. And
Yeah.
it just kind of reminded me when you were talking about that just now. Yeah. And so, and also I've noticed just over the years, a lot of maybe disorganization with the fiscal agencies around reimbursements, and also in accurately paying wages to those that are working with them. And is there anything that support planners can do to help families along those lines, or anything that can be done about it? So thanks.
Yes and no. So I have a family that immediately popped to mind when you were talking about wages being paid out correctly. So I don't recommend that fiscal, but I can't tell you about that right now. But that's part of why I like to be kept in the loop of things. So, you know, when these emails are flying back and forth, the fiscals can give lots of reasoning behind things. And sometimes that can be very confusing to the client, or it's just plain frustrating that they can't find a way to get paid their wages or get paid their receipts. And so I try to act as an intermediary in that and looking at things. You know, part of it needs to be that you follow the correct steps in doing so, you know, asking for reimbursement for things and asking for your wages. I find that the fiscals will often say that you didn't follow the right steps in doing that when that is not the case. So when you have an issue with a fiscal about something, make sure at the time that you're asking and saying that there's a problem, that you send a copy of your different timesheets, that you send a copy of what the receipts you have already sent in, so you can ask very specifically about what's going on. You can also attach their own spending summary that'll say, you know, I was supposed to be paid this amount of money. I sent in this receipt and, you know, you underpaid me or whatever. So keep track of it. My personal fiscal, although I've been with them for years, I can send things in that are reimbursable, and they may not send me a check ever for it. And so they say it got lost in the system, and I don't know that I need to represent it to them until I ask the question about why it hasn't been paid out. So keep on top of things as a paid parent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Carolyn. If I could ask a question, do all support planners have contracts typically? And should a parent always ask for a contract if it's not offered? And what should be in that contract?
Well, I gave you my example of what I put in my contract as far as the services I provide. And so that should definitely be in there. There should be a separate or a portion of mine is separate of a release of information. I do not call mine a contract. I call mine an agreement, and I am very specific about why I call that an agreement. And it's because you are agreeing to what services you want me to provide. I am not agreeing to anything that you're going to do for me. And so I prefer it looked at that way. The past 6 months or so, counties, which I think totally should not be allowed, have said that upon demand, they can ask for the agreement. So you should definitely have one. It should be signed every single year. If a county ever did ask me to send it, I would be very resistant to that because, again, I work for my clients. I don't work for them. So I don't find it necessary for them to have that document. So that's just me, but yeah, it's one of the things where I think the counties are kind of stepping in between things that they really shouldn't be. So.
Thank you so much, Marta.
Mhm.
I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone else has a question. Feel free to go off mute, or you can type a question into the chat. So we can keep the lines of communication open after we're finished today. We did record this so that we can offer it on demand if there's something that you want to go back and review, or if you missed the beginning, or if you'd like to share it out with someone. Marta, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your time and expertise and energy, as well as those documents.
You're welcome. I do want to offer, I put my contact information out there. If you have questions, feel free to give me, a call or shoot me an email about that. I'm more than happy to answer things. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important that everybody understands the services that are available to them and avail themselves of what they are able to.
Yes, and it can be quite complex. So information like this is really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you so much, Marta.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.